Chapter 16, The End of Loyalty. My brothers and sisters would often come home for the weekend. Our driveway would be full of GM cars. When my Aunt Eleanor bought a Ford, they treated her as a traitor. My brother lined up the cars on the lawn, placing hers in front to highlight how out of place it was. We supported GM come hell or high water. But over time, this slowly changed. Marilyn and Tom were still in Dover, New Hampshire in 1967, with Tom working on a doctoral in genetics and Marilyn a BS degree. They were campaigning for McCarthy for the fall presidential elections. Tom was quite involved, and being a naturally good speaker, was a welcomed volunteer. Well, 1967 was a pretty tumultuous year for everyone, nationwide. I think it's safe to say the Thumb of Michigan was not filled with big McCarthy supporters, and the draft board notified Tom he was to be in Michigan teaching within 2 weeks, or they would be drafting him for deployment to Vietnam. Everyone understood this was a direct order to stop him from campaigning. His dad was a superintendent for a school and found him a job in Holly, Michigan teaching science, and he was awarded a master's degree but was cheated out of a doctoral. They packed up and headed back home a few days after the order and 1 day after my sister delivered her first baby. My mother had gone out there to help with the baby and rode home with them. They walked in the back door with full-blown hives swelling their faces and a crying baby. After Tom got a few paychecks, they purchased a new GM diesel station wagon with wood panels. You talk about cool. But GM did something monumentally disastrous that year. They decided to put gas engines in cars and label them diesel. This only works for a while. Then the cars burn up on the side of the road. This is exactly what happened to Marilyn and Tom. It broke my family's heart. It truly did. It broke our loyalty. From then on, Dad pointed out every misstep made at GM, from fighting over safety matters to pay. He used to point out that unions protected too many poor workers and GM did not demand their firing. But then he saw they were diminishing workers' protections and retirements, and he just thought they'd lost their way. This was also the start of lemon laws. Along about that time, Dad ramped up the pressure on me, asking me every once in a while when I would graduate. When he brought home the forms to establish his age, I figured out he wanted to retire. I got him to admit he didn't want to retire until I had graduated, but he did, ever so slightly. Mother stayed on with the new owners of the insurance office. She had never actually received a paycheck and thus no Social Security for herself. She really wanted Social Security in her own right, so she stayed for another 20 quarters. She also applied and got her own credit card. Even though she had paid all the bills over the years, she had no credit. She was so proud of getting that card and starting to build her own credit. She made it clear that this was a big step for women. Oh, my dad loved to tease Marilyn's husband, Tom. Dad made Tom dig a hole for him that we all knew was just a waste of time. Then he made Tom move the hole. Mother got on Dad for that, so Dad took out a 5-pound frozen jerry can and told Tom to punch holes in the bottom and set it deep into the dirt hole. This gave Dad a wormhouse and made Tom feel like he had done something, but we all knew it was just for show. Dad had another trick up his sleeve that he tried on Tom until it worked. The old coal gravity feed furnace had been replaced, but was always evident by hot air grates in the floor. One of these grates was directly across from the toilet, and from it you could see into the basement at the bottom of the steps. How convenient when you had a long sit. Dad took silver change and placed it on the basement floor under the old grate. Then he sat. He smoked in the bathroom, so a little weight was fine. Dad had Tom working on a project which had him running up and down the basement steps. The change sat at the bottom of the steps, and Dad waited and waited. Soon Tom spied the change laying on the floor when he came down the steps and bent over to retrieve it. As soon as he bent down, Dad poured a glass of water on his head. Tom screamed. We all laughed because we all knew what was going on and we had been all waiting. I asked Mother once, "You gonna let Dad do that to Tom?" She said, "Tom's got to learn to think on his own, and this will teach him that."